Hello, everybody. So this is week 9 and 10. Actually, I think we're closer to 10 and 11. Yeah, because our last date is April the 17th. Probably wouldn't hurt to take a look at that, actually, just so we know when our last day is. So our last day is supposed to be April 17th, which lands on a Friday. So that gives us, based on the fact that this week is entirely tests, then it'll be this week, so 1, and today, so it's 2. Sorry, 2. Yeah, 2 weeks. That's it. That's all we got. Wow. Yeah, we're getting right towards crunch time. So 2 weeks. So this week is going to be kind of a double lesson. If you look at the SCM education site, and you take a look at what we have, I have 9 and 10 as parent-child relationships, and I have 11 as working with files, and then 12 with error handling, but I'll combine these two together. So next week will be these 2 lessons. This is all of this lesson, which has been reduced and shrunk down, so don't worry, I'm not going to give you a ton of content. I've actually excluded one part in this lesson that deals with commenting. But yeah, so the general idea is just parent-child relationships. Last week's lesson was just authentication plus a little bit of validation, sanitization, and normalization. A couple of people reached out and thought we were just being redundant, but we weren't. There was a few pieces we had to cover in this in order for us to move on. So today is going to be parent-child relationships, which is a super important concept when it comes to dealing with applications. It's very rare that you'll have an application that doesn't have some sort of connection to another piece of data. So for example, you might have teams and then a team member, right? So the team member would belong to a team. The team would be the parent, the team member would be the child. Or an author and books, right? So the author would be the parent and the book would be the child. Those are called parent-child relationships, and they come in fairly prevalent when you start dealing with relational databases, and it's a huge core fundamental part of relational databases and why we use them. When you think of relational databases, you can think of it like a hierarchy, like a tree of these little micro relationships that all exist within this application. And I've built like massive applications with huge amounts of relationships, where things are, entangled with like a parent-child relationship to the point where they're like 5 or 6 levels deep kind of thing. So it's a very common practice, even when you start getting into like NoSQL applications where you're working with Mongo or DynamoDB. They still wind up with relationships in the end. You still wind up with these like structures regardless, because you do need data that relates to other data. That's like data has to own data. That's just the way it is, especially when you start working with users, because you're going to need some way to kind of tie the data for that specific user to the user themselves. So a good example of that is blogging. So here's a little test site that I created that we're going to build today. This is the finished example of it. So some of this should seem familiar, right? We have our registration that we built last week. We also have our login form, right? Some of the new stuff is like this navigation here. We didn't have that before. I've incorporated it in. You can feel free to take a look at that nav, but it's not anything that tricky. We are going to actually add some things in it because, for example, how login and register actually function based on whether you're logged in or not is kind of interesting, and how posts and the other menu options you'll receive when you log in will change based on the fact that you are an authenticated user. Like, for example, if I log in, there we go. So there's our personalized picture, right? You'll notice that I have a whole bunch of new options. I have my profile, which is the page I'm on. I have manage posts, which is currently broken, but I'll fix that in 2 seconds. And then I have new posts where I can actually create a new post. In addition, we're going to look at adding this wonderful little text editor in here that allows us to create kind of rich text and then stores it as HTML. Now we have to do some interesting stuff to validate the content in here because we don't want to strip out tags, or all the HTML tags that get created in here will be lost, but we definitely want to make sure they can't do cross-site scripting, so we'll have to take a look at how we're going to deal with that issue. Yeah, so that's hopefully going to take up the whole 2 hours or so. I'm going to try to squeeze it within 2 hours. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's the goal. All right. Yeah, so let's get started. All right. So I have a good memory, but it seems to be extremely short. I completely forgot that I had removed the tables that are required for this in order to manage the post or do anything with posts. The SQL tables are missing. That's why I'm getting a fetch all on a Boolean. It means basically that the SQL command that I'm calling is returning false, and the fetch all is trying to basically fire on a false, which doesn't work. So let's go ahead and put those in because that's a good place to start. I'm going to connect to AWS admin. Now I've already set this up. You guys already have access to this table. If you look at the .env file, you'll see all the things you need in the .env file. So everything should be good there. But basically, we're going to be working with this file here. Now I'm going to get rid of this so that you can see what I'm doing, and then I can kind of explain it as I go. I'm going to add these new tables into our examples database. So I'm going to try to spell it correctly. All right, so this is where we're going to start. So right now our database contains a few of our tables that we've created so far: contacts, new shoes, and shoes, right? But those are a part of our old examples. The last example we created was users, and we're actually going to utilize users today. We're going to make users our parent table. So the idea is that a user will own blogs. That's the idea. Or posts. We'll call them posts, right? So a user will be able to author a post, and the post will be unique to the user, right? So each post will have a unique user and be connected to that unique user. But the user themselves will have several different posts. So this is this parent-child relationship that I was talking about before. We can actually kind of see a diagram in it. I apologize, but this is still a work in progress. I will try to get it updated for what we're going to learn today because it is a little bit odd. There's not very much text or anything inside here right now. Let's see, I just need a diagram. I have a diagram on this. Somewhere I have a diagram. Thought I did. I was just looking at it earlier. Might be under index view. Yes. Okay, so it's under our index view. So here it is right here. I'm just going to open this in a new tab. So here's our index view. I'll zoom it in a little bit. Okay, so this is the diagram of our tables. This actual thing is known as an ERD, which stands for Entity Relational Diagram. The idea is that it shows how your tables are going to go together and what their relationships are. So now this comment section we're not doing. We're really only relying on users and posts, so you can kind of ignore this comments piece. So the idea is that our users table, has a first name, a last name, an email, and a password. It doesn't have all this extra stuff in it, but we have those 4 columns. And in our post table, we have an ID, a title, and a content. We're also going to have a field called synopsis, which will basically be just like a small content descriptor that we can apply to our posts. So the way we get these two to connect to each other is we give it a unique ID. We give it an ID that belongs to its parent. So the post parent is users, and we connect it by adding a user ID into the post. That user ID allows us to be able to connect these two, to tie them together, so that we know that this post belongs to this particular user. Then when we're creating a SQL request and we're trying to query for all the posts, we just simply add a where clause that filters them down by the user ID. So we only get that user's post back in our query. So when we visualize relationships, we have defined our database. Here's the rules we're actually applying. So in our scenario, one user has many posts. So one user will contain many posts. This post database post table might have 12,000 records in it, and we might have 6,000 users, but one user might own 10,000 of those posts, and another user might only have 1 post, right? So we have one user that has many posts. If we keep going and we were to add the comments section, one post would actually have many comments, right? Whereas one user might have many comments as well. So they both have this one-to-many collection or connection between comments and users and comments and posts, right? But then when you look at it the other way, one post only has one user. So a post can't have multiple users. There's not multiple authors that have created this post, right? Only one user has created the post, hence how we have only the user ID. So the child will always contain the parent's ID. That's the idea. All right. Once we're ready, we can actually use things called joins in order to connect all our data up together. And then we can see all the users' posts by just pulling all the posts related to that user. But we're not going to use joins. That gets kind of complex. You are welcome to look at this, though. I will publish something so that you can see it. However, we're not going to use joins. We're just going to use some simple queries in order to gather all of our data. So let's move back onto our MySQL database here. We need to add our two new tables. So I'm going to add the SQL here. I'm also going to open up my notes. And I'll just put them on the other side for now. Make sure we're still recording here. All right, so we already have our users table. Now we need to create our posts table. So we're going to create table posts. And actually, we'll just protect ourselves a bit. If not exists, which it doesn't, but still. It's nice to get in the habit of doing that. Then we're going to give it an ID column. And it will have a size of 11 characters. It can't be null. And it has to auto-increment. So every post will have its own unique ID as well as its parent ID. It needs both of those pieces. The primary key will obviously be the ID column. Now we're ready to add in our fields. So our first field is going to be the parent ID. So we're going to say user ID, which will be int 11 and cannot be null. Now it doesn't need to auto-increment because it's already been predefined. So all we need to do is actually reference the user ID in the parent table. This user ID, though, has to be added to it. It has to have a user ID. A post cannot exist without a user ID. Because of that, we want to add something called a constraint. What the constraint will do is it forces that the user ID has to exist in order for the record or the row to exist. So what we do is we add another index thing. First, we're going to add an index key called user ID. And it relates to the user ID column. You can actually call it whatever you want, but we're going to call it user ID. And then we're going to set our constraint, which will be attached to posts. This is just a random name you come up with. So this stands for post foreign key 1. This has to be unique for every foreign key you create. That's just the name. Foreign key is going to relate to the user ID column. References users ID, right? So this is the table it's referencing and the column that we want to reference. The foreign key is this column. The references is the other table. So this would be users ID column. That's what it's going to reference. And then we want to add a flag that says on delete cascade. And what this will do is if we remove a user, so if we remove the user, any post that has that user's ID in it will automatically get removed. That way we don't wind up with posts that are floating around in our database that have no connection to a user. So if the user leaves, deletes their account, then it's going to remove all the posts related to that user. Now we can add in the columns that actually apply to creating a post. So title, which will be a variable character of up to 1,000 characters. Actually, I don't think it needs to be that long. Let's make it 300 characters. and can't be null. Has to be provided. A synopsis, if I can spell today, var and the synopsis will be up to 500 characters and cannot be null, or sorry, can be null. And also content, which will be text and can be null. There. So they can create a new post with a title and then just leave it empty and go back and edit it and then add in the details they want to add afterwards. So if we create this table, there we go, we created the table. If I refresh, we can see now that we have a post table with all the columns we need, ID, user ID, title, synopsis, and content. You'll notice that under indexes, it has a primary key and the user ID. And under the foreign keys, we have a foreign key connection that has an on-delete cascade to it. So everything we need for the users and the posts. So once again, users will be the parent table, and they will have multiple posts as their children. Okay, so one user will have multiple posts. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you've already done that in your SQL class, and this is just a refresher. If not, then obviously it's new, and feel free to send me Slack messages if you have more questions about how that particular relationship idea works. But yeah, you're going to see it in action here in a few minutes as we create our blogging application. So speaking of which, let's go ahead and grab our starter files from the Lesson 9 folder. And I'm going to click Show in Folder. This is last week, so I'm going to just delete those. But I'm going to extract these. Let's try that again. I have to click on it first. Extract all. Extract. Click in here. So there's where our starter files are. I'm going to right-click on this and choose to copy. And then my WAMP64 is in my D drive. Yours is not in your D drive. Yours is in your C drive, but you can always navigate to it by clicking on the W's and going to the www directory. However, mine doesn't point to the correct location anymore. Yours will, right? So once you get into that directory, you're going to go into the COMP-1006. You're going to paste that folder in here, and you're going to rename it to Lesson 09, which should be, fairly familiar considering we've done this like 20 times. Then I'm going to open this up with code, and I'm ready to go. So I'll put this to my left, I will put this over to the right, and we'll navigate to that page, which will be localhost / comp-1006. And there's my Lesson 9 folder, and here we go, and we already have some errors that we're going to have to resolve to get things going right from the get-go. All right, so when we get our folder open, we're going to see that it looks a little bit similar to Lesson 6. There's the config files come back, right? So we're going to need to add some stuff into our config file, which we didn't have before. Now we have the sessions folder, a users folder, a post folder, a CSS folder, and that very familiar, let's do this again. There we go. Our very familiar underscore includes folder with the partials and the utilities. If this with the config is still baffling you, please go review Lesson 6 because it saves you having to ask a lot of questions that were already answered in Lesson 6, right? So hopefully that still makes sense. I will review this in just 2 seconds so that you understand a basic understanding. But the folders that we created, so the files we created last week are still existing. They're just moved around. So this is our index page that we're currently looking at over here. The users related it's stuff like inserting a new user into the database, their profile, and registering them as a brand new user all exist, but it's sitting under our users folder now. And then sessions contains our login, logout, and authenticate functions. That's all within there. So everything still exists. Under partials, you'll find the header, and you'll also find the footer as they've been split up because obviously they're just redundant. Same with notification. I've moved it into this partials folder. And everything is currently linked up in the views. So you don't have to worry about linking it up, but we are going to be including config often, and we're going to use our base path. And if you still kind of forget how those things work, then it's definitely a good idea to review lesson 11. So let's talk about config.php a little bit, just so we can get a recap of how it works. Basically, all paths that come from our application are relative, right? So every path that we work with is relative. And the problem with relative paths is they're based on the file location. So if I navigate to users, for example, which we don't actually have a users, but if I go to register, this page actually exists in the users folder, register.php. However, notice that the navigation is still here and there's no problem with that. The reason why we're not having an issue with the nav being here and we're not getting errors that basically says this can't be included here is because we've normalized our paths. So the underscore config.php file, that's what its purpose is. It helps us normalize our paths. So for example, we set an include folder based on this includes directory, which makes it so that anytime we go to include something, as long as we treat it as though it's starting from the includes directory and we reference our paths based on the includes directory, then everything kind of just works together the way it's supposed to. Same thing when we want to go to create a link, like so the register.link, actually these links up here, you can see all these links up here. They're all utilizing base path because again, we need to reference from the whole application, from basically this whole piece, so we know where we're coming from. Otherwise it just breaks and it won't work properly. So we want to make sure all that's in place and that everything is working correctly, so we don't wind up with any issues. Now I'm noticing too that I didn't create an examples folder for all this to sit in. It's just sitting right directly in lesson 9. Hopefully that's okay. It doesn't need to live in an examples folder. If you want to move it into the example folders, that's fine. All these links will just update as they're supposed to anyways, so it won't be a big deal. And like I said, lesson 6 will definitely help make this a little clearer on what all these files are, or what all these do and where they point to. The only thing that will be new is this base file path. We have one reference to do at some point that's kind of like a unique path that we can't rely on this includes, so we need a way to be able to reference the file directory structure, and that's what this particular definition will do. If you want to look at this definition, you certainly can. I'm hoping this file is correct. I think I remember us creating a add slashes function that makes this work better. It's those of you on Macs, I believe, had issues with that. You may need that add slashes function. We're not pushing this to Heroku today, so there shouldn't be any issues there. But if you do have an issue, then go take a look at your config file in one of the other lessons, because you'll want that add slashes function. All right, so our next piece is we're going to create some helpful functions. Right now we have this error, and the reason is that it says call to undefined function called authorized. So the one thing we didn't do when we created our user's profile, for example, I have this profile page. We basically did this. We just checked to see if the user was set. They had to log in. If they weren't logged in, then we located them back to the login and we had this session start. We're going to make it so that this is a lot cleaner because we're going to be doing this quite a bit. For example, a user can't create a new post, delete a post, or update a post, or insert a post unless they're already authorized. If they're not authorized, they can't touch those posts. So we want to make sure that's the case for them. So we're gonna basically build some authorization functions to help us out, and we're just going to add them right directly into our config folder to make our lives a little simpler. So we're actually going to add a whole bunch of different things. The authorize function is the first one that we'll add, so we'll do that first because we have the error over there for it. So we'll create a function called authorized. And the first thing we're going to do, because we need to check against the session, and we don't know where we're calling this, so we want to make sure there is a session started. So we'll just say if the session status, sorry, not start, status is equal to PHP session none, meaning that the session hasn't started yet, then we want to start the session. Okay. And then all we're going to do is return either the user or just false. All right. So if this is not set, undefined, or false, it will return this side, which is false. Otherwise, it's just going to return the user themselves. So just a very simple authorization function. If I click refresh now, notice everything is working. And the reason is because in our index.php, I have this, which says if you're not authorized, then show you the register and login functions, which are these two buttons down here. Otherwise, don't. So if you're logged in, then I'm not going to show you these two little call to actions, which kind of makes sense. Why would I show you those call to actions if you're already logged in? All right. I don't like to use functions before I explain their creation. This is definitely just me forgetting that I had left that in there because I wasn't really doing much with this page. So I wasn't making any real changes to it, so I forgot about it, really. All right, so our next step is let's go take a look at the login. We basically want to just make sure that our users flow for creating a new user and logging them in is all working and logging them out. So we'll go to register. Looks like register still functions, right? Let's go ahead and create a new user. This is going to be interesting because we already have probably a bunch of people who have created new user accounts. And remember, we're all pulling from Amazon, so all the users are sitting in Amazon. So if I click register, there we go. Yep, registered successfully. So let's go ahead and see if we can log in. Yep, so that's all working. So our original experience still works. The only thing I've noticed is that the nav doesn't really make a lot of sense. If we're logged out, which also works by the way, we can still see authorized functionality links, right? So profile, manage post, new post, log in, register, and log out. Like, why is log out here if we've already logged out, right? Now this thing's actually telling us we need to log in. So what we want to do is fix this so only the relevant ones display. So let's go to our nav. There's our nav. And what we'll do is we'll use that authorization function to basically limit the view of certain other links, right? So basically just knock links off the page that can't be viewed unless you're authorized or not authorized, depending on what we're trying to do. So the first one is this user's profile, right? They should not be able to see the user's profile. So let's create a condition that just says if authorized, right? So if you're authorized, then you can go ahead and see this link. And don't forget, we need to close that as well. There we go. So now if I refresh the page, it's disappeared, you notice. Now I still have posts, manage posts, and new posts. Posts is public, so you should always be able to view posts. However, manage posts and new posts are definitely not public. Those are 100% only authorized users. So again, we'll just wrap if authorized around these two links, right? So the manage post link and the new post link. And if. There we go. So if I refresh, now they've disappeared. So now we just have these two public access points, which makes sense. Login and register should be available right now because they aren't logged in. However, logout should not be available because they aren't logged in. So let's go deal with that as well. We'll just scroll down. So here's login and register and logout. Now, actually, there's quite a bit of logic that needs to be done here. First of all, we want to say if they're not authorized, right? So if they're not authorized, then they won't see the logout. Oh, wait, no, sorry, that's wrong. Backwards. Let's try that again. If they're authorized, they will see logout, but if they're not, they won't see it. They'll just see login and register. So, however, when they are logged in, so let's log in and show you what I mean here. log in. Let's go to home. Now you can see log in, register, and log out. Log out makes sense to show up because we are authorized, but we don't want to display log in and register. So let's hide those. And we can do that by just reversing the condition in our function using the not operator. So if they're not authorized, sorry, if they are authorized, which basically means if they're logged in. I think I'm a little stir crazy, so my brain's not functioning on all cylinders here. There we go. Now we have the logout button. And we also have only our authorized menu options. So if I log out, you can see we have home and post, which are public-based pages. If I click login and I log in, now you can see I have log out and I have our min only pages, or sorry, our authorized only pages. Cool. So that's good. The only thing is, though, is it doesn't stop people from actually accessing things like the profile page, for example, directly. So if I log out, the user can just go users profile.php and attempt to access it directly. Now we have a redirect that we created a while ago in our profile.php that deals with that. However, I'd like to make this a little simpler because we're going to be redirecting so often. I don't really want to write these 5 lines of code continuously. So I have some more helpful functions that we can write that will make our lives a lot easier. We just have to make sure that we include our config file at the top of every page that we work with, every script we create, which is not a big deal because we need it anyways. So this function is, we're going to create the redirect function first. So the redirect function will take the user and redirect them to wherever this path is. So the redirect, you'll remember, is just header, location, right? And then you'll remember from lesson 6, we have to add the base path so that it creates it properly, and then we just add path to it. So this gives us our redirect, our location with our base path all the way through, and then we want to make sure we exit our script wherever this function gets called so the script doesn't keep parsing. So a very simple redirect function, 2 lines to get it to work. Plus, we also tend to redirect with messages, right? So we always add success messages and error messages. So we're going to create a helpful function called redirect with messages. It's going to take it's going to have 3 parameters, right, for 3 arguments: path, messages, and the type of messages you want to create. First thing we're going to do is create a session variable called $type that is equal to the messages. Now, in order for that to work, we are definitely 100% going to need to start a session key. So we're going to say if session status equals PHP session none, then session start. So if we try to call this function on a page where we don't have a session, it will work, and all that goes for any of these sessions, really. We could add this message into the other one, but I don't want to. Let's just start at the top here, and we'll just work with it like this. Actually, that's not really the best practice. It would actually make more sense for us to do this. Yeah, that's a better approach. I know it might seem redundant, but we really should make sure that it's available within the function being called. Then it's always guaranteed to fire. So function, we're going to create a couple of helpful ones based on the above one. These are basically like aliased versions of that. So we're going to say redirect with errors. And the way it will work is it will take path and the errors array. And then all it's going to do is call the function that's above there with messages. And we're going to pass it the path they give us, the errors they give us, and we're going to preset its type to errors. And then we're going to do the same thing with successes. And you'll see this often. It kind of feels unnecessary, but it makes it simpler when you're trying to just redirect and you want the person to be able to read exactly what you're doing. this makes that very simple for us because you know definitively that this is redirecting with successes. And there we go. And then the last one that we want to do, which will be very helpful and we'll do a lot, function authorized or redirect. And this one is going to take a path, but the path we're going to make it default equal to sessions login.php because most of the time if they're not authorized, we're going to redirect them to the login page to log in. We're going to say if you're not authorized, so we're just calling our function from above, redirect with errors, right? So we're going to call our other function, give them the path, and then give them the array of errors, which really only has one error in it. You are not authorized for this action. There we go. We have 6 nice, helpful functions that will make working with our pages a lot easier. Why don't we go update our profile page with one of these functions to make our lives simple? So instead of needing all of this stuff, what we'll do instead, we don't even need the session start because the function already calls it. Actually, we should leave it there just because we know it's for this. Instead, we'll just call the function, which is authorized or redirect. And we don't even need to add an error message there. So now, if we attempt to go to users profile.php, it redirects back and it says we're not authorized for this action, but you'll notice that we have an error. Like we have a big error message here, and we can still see the profile page and all that type of stuff, but we're not logged in. So this error message kind of hides underneath this nav. If we want to be able to see the error message, just click inspect. Click on this little thing. It allows you to click the nav. So there we are. And then in here, you can actually hit delete and get rid of the nav. So undefined index user on line 10, and that has to do with that the session user doesn't exist. The authorized or redirect should have taken care of that, and we should have never hit this page. So let's go see why that's an issue. We go back to config, redirect with errors, right? Redirect with messages. If the session start, session type equals messages. Oh, we forgot the redirect part of this. That's why. There we go. So now it'll redirect properly. So if I refresh, there we go. You are not authorized for this action. And if I attempt to access it again, user's profile, yep, it just redirects back. So there's no chance of us getting to the profile.php page without being authorized. And we're using our very handy authorize or redirect function for that. So nice and cool. So there's our profile page. Looks a little cleaner, a little smaller as well. Everything is working for our users. So our user is entirely intact. We have everything we need for our user application flow that we created before. Now we're ready to move on to creating a blog. So obviously in order to create a post, we need to be able to have a post, right? So if I click on post right now, it's going to come here, but we're not going to see any information, mostly because we don't have any posts right now, right? So it can't output posts when we don't have any posts. Plus it can't output posts because we're not actually retrieving them like we should be. So let's create some posts. So in order to create a post, we need to log in. So we'll log in. You can log in as any one of the user accounts that we've created before. Totally up to you which one you want to use. I'm going to log in. There we go. It looks like this is in there. That's pretty funny. And we want to create a new post. So we're going to go to new post. So it says, Smith the post. Let your creativeness flow. And there's no form here, and there's just a back to blogs. So let's talk about how we're going to do this. So in our posts folder here, we have a whole bunch of files. We have update, show, new, manage, insert, index, edit, delete, and form. Now, generally when you're creating a RESTful API application like we're creating here, we want to treat resources as like an endpoint. And that's what we're kind of doing. You'll see that we point to posts, and then we want to point to the action that we want to commit. So when we go to new, we want to be able to create a new post, and it's one of our views, and we have 4 views. Actually, we have 5 views in total. We have new, we have index, we have show, and we have manage, and we also have edit, right? And then the rest are our processing scripts, which are like insert, update, and delete. Those are our processing scripts. So in new, we should have a form here that allows us to be able to create a new post. The thing is, though, is that form, the difference between the form on the new page and the form on the edit page are minimal. There's very minimal differences between those two pages. So it doesn't make sense to create a form for both of those and just duplicate the code. Instead, we can take advantage of partials and put the code that we want into the form.php page and then just include that form. We'll add logic into the form that manipulates it based on the type of action we want to do. So if it's a new, then the form will just look like its basic self. But if it's an edit, we'll add a hidden field that actually submits an ID so that you can associate the edit with that particular post, and then you can update the correct record in the database. So we're going to create a form. That's our first step. So let's open up the form.php page. And I've started the form out for you, but there's not very much going on. A couple things we need to do here right off the bat. One, we want to make sure that nobody accesses this form directly. It's not likely that they will, but we want to make sure they don't. So we'll add a little chunk of PHP at the top here. We'll require once. We want to require it once because we don't want it to accidentally get included multiple times if it's already being included. Config.php, right? So that gives us our base path, our file path, as well as our include configuration already. We're going to run authorized or redirect, which basically says if you're not authorized, then it automatically redirects them to the login PHP page because they're not allowed to access this form directly. So that handles anybody who goes to the forum automatically. We also want to deal with the fact that if we have any errors in our insert or update, we're going to send back the form values. So just like we did with our users, we need to deal with that. So we'll deal with it in here. And I'll explain this in 1 second. All right, so we're going to first attempt to get our form values from the session. If they're not in the session, then we're going to attempt to get it from a post. The post will be inside the edit.php page. We'll actually go get a post using the user ID and then populate this variable. Okay, you'll see that in a bit. So if the session values doesn't exist or it's not set, then it's going to attempt to try to access it from this post variable that currently doesn't exist or is created. And if that's the case, then it's just going to return back null and populate form values with the value of null. Basically the same thing we did with users, just now we have this second OR that we didn't have before, right? And then the last thing, obviously, that we want to do is unset the session form values so that we're clearing those form values out for ourselves. Cool. All right, so our action is interesting because our action needs to be able to handle two actions. One action is being able to submit our form values to the insert.php page or script. And the other action is being able to take our form values and submit them to the update.php. So we need to be able to account for those two possible scenarios. And what we're going to do, we'll link up with our base path, right? So you'll remember the base path points to the root of our whole application. Posts, right? So now we're into this folder here, posts. And then the page we want to access. So we're just going to say action, and we're going to end it with .php. So the action is just going to be a singular word like insert or update, and we'll automatically append .php onto it for it. The other thing we can't forget, because this post has to be, this form has to be posted, we have to make sure we add the method post. Because by default, forms are automatically use the HTTP method get. Now we can add a bit of logic to deal with our if condition. So if our edit page. So if the action is equal to update, right? So if we're actually wanting to submit this to the update processing script, then we want to make sure we have a hidden input with the name of ID and the value equal to the form values ID. Now we could put or null here, but we don't really need to because it's going to get it from post automatically. This should never execute if the page is on new. If it's on new.php, this should not execute. If it does, then we've done something wrong for sure. So in order to make this work and to see whether or not this exists, we need to add this action and its value to our new and edit pages. So in our new page, we're going to add an action in here, which is just a variable, and we're going to call it insert like so. If I refresh our page, nothing happens, and that's because we don't have our form yet. So let's go ahead and add our form. And this is why we needed that other config value. So that's this value right here. Because the include will automatically start in the includes folder, we need to get it to not do that. We need to get it to start at the root of our application. So that will stop that from doing that. So there's posts, and then it's going to be underscore form.php. Go, hit refresh. There's our submit button. You can't see anything right now because the form is not exactly displayed, but here's our form. Here's our section. There's the form, there's the action. It's pointing to insert.php, so the action filled correctly. And we don't have the ID field, which makes sense because this is an insert form and not an update form. So let's go to our edit.php, and we're going to repeat the same actions that we just did before. So it looks like this one's actually missing a few things. Missing the underscore config file for some reason. I think I must have got a little heavy when I was removing things. There we go. And they can't edit unless they are also authorized. So we can run the authorized or redirect function in here. We're going to create a page and tell them it's called edit. We're going to create a page title and tell them it's called edit post. I'll show you how those work in a second. And then we're going to create our action and make it equal to update. So now if I change this page to edit.php, there we go. Obviously post is not going to work because there's no value in it, but I wonder if it's still managed to create our form for us. I think it will because it's just a notice. So we'll include once base file path post update.php. Sorry, just update. No, sorry, form underscore form.php. There we go. Our action is update. Refresh this. All right, so there's our section, our form pointing to update.php, so that's good. And there's our hidden input, which means all this is working as we expected it to work. All right. We'll deal with edit in a bit. We're just going to continue on with new for now. So here's our new page. It basically looks exactly like edit. It's the same, but we just need to change our form. Oh wow, this like completely locked out. Here we go. All right, so let's finish off our form so that everything looks good under here. All right, so we're going to add a div with form group. And that div's going to have a label in it. called title, and an input that's a form control. Its type will be text, that's totally fine. Its name is going to be called title. And it's going to have a value. So we're going to do the same thing we did with users, where we automatically reference form values. That way, if there's any errors, it just jumps back to this page. But then the other wonderful side effect is if we're on the edit page and we've already gotten a post, then it should just use that to pre-populate the post values, which is kind of handy. Not sure why this is white and not the right color. Doesn't look incorrect. Anyways, I'm super lazy, so I'm just going to duplicate this for synopsis. So we're going to change title to synopsis and synopsis, like so. And then this title and that title are also going to be synopsis. And then we're going to do that again. So Alt Shift and down. And this one is going to be called content. Content. And these are content. I'm also going to add an ID to this one called Summer Note. And we're going to add a nice little text editor in here that is called Summer Note. The Summer Note will make our text look really cool and give us kind of like a WYSIWYG editor, which stands for what you see is what you get. And then we can use that to actually edit our values. We'll do that eventually. We're not going to do it right off the bat. Right now, we'll just leave this the way it is. Also notice this is an input and not a text area, so we need to change that to text area. And the value gets removed here. There we go. And this gets removed. And this just becomes /text area. There we go. And you can make it bigger or smaller. There. And we're going to convert this into a Summer Note text editor. So these are our fields. Super fast form, not too much to it. We can fill out these things. Left me speechless. It was a dark and stormy night. And then we can write our actual blog. I have no words. What's interesting is if I type in if I type in lorem, there we go. And you can do the same in your text editor. If you type in lorem, it will automatically give you some lorem. And then we'll just submit. And it goes to our post-insert.php, ready for us to actually process the insert statement. So I'm going to close all of these. I'm going to open up insert.php, and we will start with insert.php. So right now with our insert.php, most of it will be exactly the same as the way we had to deal with users, right? So we're going to have validating, normalizing, and sanitizing, just like we did when we were creating a user. Some differences are we need to require our config file, but we already knew that because we need to do that at the top of every page we're working with. There are nicer ways in PHP to do this where you don't have to do this. You can actually have Apache do it automatically, but we're just going to do it the simplistic way. We want to be able to deal with error handling, right? So we already know how to deal with that. We're going to add all of our errors to an errors array. Actually, we don't need to add to an errors array, come to think of it, because we don't have many of them, actually. We only really have one. So we don't need to do that. So what we do need to do, though, is check to see if the user is authorized before we do anything else on this page. There we go. All done. And then we might as well start our session because a lot of the stuff we're going to be doing is going to require on the session existing. Being that the user exists, so we're just apply the user. We'll grab it from the session key and store it in a user variable. There we go. So validating, the only things we need to validate right now is that the title is not empty, because it's the only one, if you remember the database, that's actually required. So we'll just say if empty $_post title. So if the title is empty, then we basically want to reassign our form values, just like we did in the users table. So we'll reassign the form values, and then we'll use one of our nice new functions, redirect with errors, and we'll redirect them back to post new.php, and the error message we'll give is please include a title. Nice and clean, and a lot less code than what we had to write before. Next, we're ready to normalize our code. So let's normalize the post title. It's really the only one we need to normalize. UC words, string to lower, $_post title. There we go. So that's going to basically lowercase all of the title and then make each letter or each word individually uppercased. Simple normalization. Then our sanitization, we'll do these for both the title and the synopsis. We could do this as a loop. I didn't do it in my code, but we could do this as a loop. So we'll do it for title and synopsis as $field. And then we just go $_post, $field equals filter var $_post, $field. And then the sanitization constant that we're going to work with is the filter sanitize string. There we go. So that will automatically sanitize any like script tags. It will also rip out HTML tags. That's the reason why we're not passing content in here. With content, we need to deal with it a little differently. Sanitizing HTML to remove script tags. Because we only want to remove we only want to remove script tags. We don't want to remove HTML tags, right? So we want to cut out any cross-site scripting possibilities, but we want to make sure that they're able to include the majority of their other types of tags, just not JavaScript. So the way we do that is we say post content, and then we're going to use a PHP function called preg replace. And its first argument is the is a pattern, like a regex pattern. It's fine if you don't know what this regex pattern is. It's totally okay. I'll explain it in 1 second here. So basically this says the beginning of the line, right? So this is, sorry, the beginning of the pattern. This is a script tag, right? With any attributes that might be inside the script tag, so source equals whatever. The closing script tag, any possible code that's inside the script tag, the closing script tag, the closing part of the pattern, and then pattern flags. I for, it's basically letter casing so that it doesn't care if it's case insensitive, which means whether the case is high or low, like uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. And I can't remember what S stands for. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. I can't remember what that stands for. Then the thing we want to replace with, right? So we just want to basically take anything like that and make it empty. And then the thing that we're trying to replace within, which is the post content. So it's just like the string replace that we've done before. It's the pattern or the needle that you're looking for, the thing you want to replace with, and then the haystack. And that's the haystack portion. Now we're ready to add our SQL in. The SQL. We have to remember that the user owns this post. So a user can only create a post under themselves. They can't create a post under another user. So we basically have a way to like blame a person for the post they've created. So this user is going to have created this post. So insert into posts values. There we go. And then we'll do our usual thing, Alt, right? Enter, and then we'll add the rest of the pieces in here. So title, synopsis, content, and user ID. So those are the four pieces we need. So these guys here are all going to be placeholders, right? So they're going to be bound parameters. This one we can actually add in directly. So we will $, oops, nope, wrong characters. Let's try that again. $user ID. So that one can be hard-coded because we get that from our session, which the user has no control over. They can't change that value, so we can hard-code that directly. We don't need to do it as a bound parameter. Now we're ready to require our connection. Careful how you spell utilities. It's one of those words that contains so many I's in it, it can definitely throw you off. We'll connect to our MySQL database. All of this is basically the same as we do in any other type of application we've done so far. Then we're ready to add a statement, or prepare our statement, sorry. So there we go, we've prepared our statement. Then our next step is to bind the parameters. So we'll bind this param, title, $_post title, and PDO param underscore string. So there we go, we bound that parameter. We're going to do that 2 more times with synopsis. Remember, these are already sanitized. We've already sanitized all these. And content. There we go. So once we've bound the parameters, and this is super important that you bind the same number of parameters that you've promised exist inside your prepared statement. Sometimes people will get an error where they've attempted to bind one more parameter than they actually have, or they're trying to bind one parameter less than they actually have, or whatever. Either way, these don't match the number that you require that these do, and because of that, you'll wind up with an error. So just keep that in mind, and then we're ready to execute. Cool. And then we're going to check for errors in our MySQL. And we're just going to check for basic errors, right? Like basically, did we not get the proper response we were looking for? Because at the end of the day, the only way we're going to get this error is usually in development, right? When we're starting to do our development, it's not likely we're going to get this error from the user. But it is possible, so. If it happens though, we're just going to basically assign the form values, right? There we go, and we're going to redirect with errors. Notice how much code we're solving and getting rid of just by doing these functions. Makes our lives so much easier. There was an error creating this post. There we go. A little vague, I will admit. Definitely not the best use case scenario. We want the newly created post ID. And the way we get that is we can query our connection for the last insert ID that was created. That we want that because we're going to redirect with a success message. And we're going to redirect to posts, show.php. And you'll remember this when we created the, oh, what was it now? I'm trying to remember what it was that we created. Countries, I think it was. When we went to edit a country or show one country, we had to provide this ID equals, right? So that we could narrow it down for our next, like where this actually winds up going. It can narrow it down and use that parameter to figure out which post it needs to pull from the database. So we're going to say post ID, right? And that's where we're going to redirect the user right back to the show page. And then we're going to say the post was successfully created. Please review your blog post, which they can do on that page. Because you remember, this will trigger that notification. So if I finish this off by hitting Control-R, boom, we're on the show page, but we've got some issues. And we also didn't get our post ID because we didn't call it post ID, we called it post. We need to call it post ID. There we go. All right, I'm just going to insert one in here. Either way, it's not going to work. We have this big error. Warning, use of undefined constant base path. Assume base path. Okay, so let's go fix that. That's in our show.php page. Oh, right off the bat, I can see the problem. We don't have our config file, right? So require once underscore config.php, super important file. Let's save that and refresh. Okay, so everything looks good. We have no title. There's not really much going on. Let's go ahead and correct some of these details and make it so that this PHP page actually shows the blog post so that we can see what the blog post is. So the one thing right off the bat is we need to retrieve the blog post based on the ID that we got back from the header. So we'll do that first. We'll correct these PHP tags because we're just going to add so much PHP. We might as well just do it all at the top here. We'll include once the utilities. And you'll notice that I'm not checking to see if the user is logged in. The reason why is because this show page is a public page that any user can look at. There's no reason for anybody to be authenticated to see it. They can't do anything on the page anyways. So now we'll get the blog post. And this should just feel very familiar. Same thing we've done before with getting countries or getting users or whatever it is we've been trying to get, right? Only now we're using the PDO method to do it. So select star from posts where ID is equal to, oh, look at that, a bound parameter. And the reason we're using a bound parameter is because you can't trust anybody or anything. So we're going to use a bound parameter. STMT equals $con. Let's prepare the SQL. There we go. Then we're going to bind our parameter. It's get that we need to use. And we're going to cast this to a param int. And by doing that, we basically stop ourselves from winding up where if they type any SQL in here, it doesn't make a difference because we're casting it to a param int. If they put a string in here, it will turn this ID to the number 0. And when you go to make the request, 0 doesn't exist, so you'll just wind up with empty coming back. $statement execute. There we go. And then $post equals $statement, and we'll use fetch because we're only getting back a singular record. That'll return one record back to us as a MySQL associate or as an associative array, which is really handy. We can check, it will return false if there's nothing in there and it comes back as empty. If it's false, then we'll just redirect with errors back to posts because that's a public page. That blog is not available. There we go. So that kind of solves that issue. If a person tries to enter whatever they want in here, then we won't get that back. If I refresh, we should get no errors, which means that we have a blog that exists. But if I try to enter in some ridiculous number here and hit enter, we get redirected with a bunch of errors there. All right. So here's our blog. We see nothing on the page, but we have posts. So let's add some stuff. So in this H1, why don't we put the post title? We'll use the shorthand echo statement. There we go. There's the title. Nice. In this p tag, I left it open for us to publish the synopsis. So we'll put the synopsis in here. There we go. It's a dark and stormy night. And then the content itself, we'll just stick right in the middle of this div. And there we are. There's our whole blog post. Looks nice and clean. Nice and clean page, very public, doesn't require a ton of info on it, and we have a back to blogs button. So why don't we click the back to blogs button and we'll fix this page here. This is our post page. The post page should actually have all of the information we need for every blog so that any user can take a look at those archives and see the blog that they want to read and click on it and go view it. That's the goal with this particular one here. All right, so we'll do that now. Let's go ahead and fix that. So let's open up index.php. And I've got most of the stuff in here. We already have our config. I'm already actually connecting to the database, selecting all this posts, but this is going to seem new. Fetch all, instead of just retrieving back a singular record, it'll actually return back an array of all of the records based on this query. So we have all of the records stored in this post. So obviously we're going to need to do a couple of things. First thing I want to do is I only want to display what I'm about to type if there are posts. If there are no posts, then I just want it to be blank because it doesn't make sense to show anything. So I'm going to use an if condition first, and I'm going to use one of these if conditions that I taught in class a while ago. If count $posts greater than 0, and that's the wonderful template if. I don't know if it's called a template if, but I'm calling it a template if. I like that because it means I can write raw HTML in here and I don't have to deal with it. So if there are posts and they're greater than that, I'm going to run a for each loop. And again, I'm going to use a template for each loop. Iterate over the posts and cast them as a post and pass that into the block. Get in the habit of making sure you type your for each open and end at the same time. All right, so we're going to use a Bootstrap class component. It's called card. Looks like that. Card's kind of nice. It just creates little blocks. Not really anything special, to be honest. We need a, we need a card body. So we'll just do card body. And then we need an H5, and it's a card title. Not card XC title, just card title. All right, so the card title will be our post. Okay, so it'll be post title. And then we're going to do pcard text. And this will be just our synopsis. So we're not going to output the content in here, just the synopsis. And that's good because the synopsis, you have to think of it from the idea that the content has HTML in it. We don't want to have to just parse big blocks of HTML. We also don't want to parse the whole blog post, right? Because otherwise this page would just be full of like massive blog posts. Makes more sense to just have a synopsis. Then the user can click to go into the post and view the actual post itself. This should work if we click refresh. Yep, there we go. Left me speechless. It was a dark and stormy night. So if I want to make this clickable so I can go to the show page that we just came from, I need to wrap something in a link. And I think the easiest way to do that is to wrap the title in a link. It seems to be the best user experience, right? So a href, we need the base path, obviously. And then we want to go to post, show.php, and you'll remember that we need to add a query parameter in here. If this seems very fresh and you're not sure why we're doing this and you're having difficulty understanding what's happening here, I do recommend going back to lesson 4 when we actually started looking at this type of navigation. And there we go. There's our A tag. So now our link is wrapped with this post, right? And this is going to be the ID of the post. There we go. If I hover over it, you can see down on the status bar there that it says lesson 9 post show.php ID equals 1. If I click on it, it takes us to the show page and it populates this, right, with our show. Now I did notice that when I changed this URL, why is it doing that? Take me away, Joe. That's interesting. Surprised it's not just automatically taking me away from this page. There we go. So now that we've done this, you can see that there's a lot of issues here. We have some errors that we should resolve, and this is on the post page. So I want to take care of that because we shouldn't have those issues. So we'll delete that out of there. All right, so count. Parameter must be an array or an object. So it's likely that post came back as a Boolean. Oh, no, sorry, that's in notification where the error is. Yeah, so I have a funny feeling in show. Yeah, you see what I did here in show on line 14? We didn't put this in an array. That's why it's got an issue. So now it's in an array. So if we go back to there we go. The blog is not available. Nice. So we have our show page. We have our blogs page, right? We're now ready to do our edit. So our edit, we need a manage .php page in order to manage these. We're going to leave this one as a nice page where the user can go and see these public things. And we're going to create a manage post page, which looks a lot like the post page, right? But will allow us to manage. Now, if you notice, post right now, this all is on the same line, and that's because of some defaults I've created. I want to show you the header. If you look at the header, there's some default page, home, and page title, blog, and with style. I'm using page to be able to create some custom classes in here, which will add some nice styling. It's what makes this home page look the way it does, but every other page looks different than that. However, if it doesn't have this page on it, page argument, it automatically defaults to home and will apply home styling to some of these pages. One of them being the manage post page, or not manage post page, sorry, the post page. So right now the home styling is applying to it. Also notice that the title is the default title, blogging with style, because we're automatically taking that as a default if no page title has been provided. So we want to make sure we provide a page title to any page that we think of so that we can guarantee that we have a unique title. So in show, same thing. This should have the same stuff in it. Once we're there, we should automatically have a variable called page that we'll just call show, and page title that we will call whatever the name of the page is, I guess. I guess it makes most sense to do that after post. There we go. We'll just do $post title. There, nice and tight. And then under the index page, same idea. And actually, we should probably prefix these with the word posts. Post archives. There we go. In show, we'll do that too. We'll prefix this with post. And we'll put it down here with the other one. There we go. Nice and clean. So now if I refresh, you'll see this looks normal because it's not adopting the home styling, and manage post will look nice and normal. All right, so manage post, edit and prosper, or delete and vanquish. So we want to add some buttons to this to make it so that we can edit these particular things. And these buttons, super simple. You remember we created the same buttons when we did the edit and delete for countries. So it's exactly the same idea. There's really no difference to that versus this. They'll look identical. There we go. Okay, so we want manage. So we'll go to manage.php for post, which is right here. Come down here. And we're going to do it outside of all of this. Links to manage posts. There we go. So let's check first. We only want to show the links if the user is logged in. Actually, that's not entirely true. Let's deal with that. We're already dealing with that. Authorize or redirect. They can't access this page if they're not logged in, right? So that's great. Otherwise, everything is exactly the same as the index page. Only we're going to do this. PHP, no, we're not. We're going to do HR. We'll add a class into the HR. So that basically says add a margin of 3 whatever to the top and bottom of the line. And then we want an A tag. And this gets kind of lengthy for sure. So it's base path, right? Slash posts slash edit.php question mark ID equals, because just like show, edit, and delete are both unique, right, to the post itself. Post ID, which is coming from the for each loop post right here, right? Then we want to turn that into a button. So we're going to add class equals, whoops, I've screwed up here. There we go. Wow, that was goofy. Class equals button mr-3, which will push the other link away from it. And we're going to call this edit. Then I'm going to hit Alt-Shift and press down and duplicate this, because the only word that changes here is delete. And we don't need this mr3. Hit refresh. Now the thing is if I click delete, this is just going to get deleted automatically. See, I click delete, immediately goes to delete, no questions asked. And if the code was working in there, it would just auto delete. We're going to add a nice little bit of JavaScript. Don't panic, it's very, very quick. I won't even, I'll explain kind of what it is. We're going to add an on click, which basically means when you click it, it's going to fire off any code in between these quotation marks. So we're going to return confirm. Confirm is a JavaScript function that basically returns back a Boolean based on your response. It will throw up a dialog box in the browser saying, confirm, are you sure you want to do this thing, or whatever it is. And if you click OK, it returns back true, but if you click cancel, it returns back false. Are you sure you want to delete this post? Nice and simple, right? So now I'm going to hit Control-Shift-R so it does a hard refresh. Click delete, and you can see, are you sure you want to delete this post? I hit cancel, and it just cancels. If I click delete again, and I hit OK, it will navigate to the delete.php page. Quick and easy two-step process that makes a much better user experience in case they accidentally hit delete. All right, so edit is the next piece we want to do. If we go to edit, right now we're here. Everything is broken, as you can see. We have an undefined variable post. There's a lot of issues. So let's go fix all those issues. Let's go to edit.php. And what we want to do is actually create our connection up here. So we're going to do $, sorry, we're going to include once underscore utilities / underscore connect.php, right? Then we're going to do our connection. There's our connection, and we're going to write some SQL as well. SQL select star from post where ID is equal to :ID. Oh, you'll notice right off the bat, this is the same code that we just wrote in show.php. So if you go to show.php, you can see all of our statements in here are the exact same. And because of that, we can literally just copy all of that, go back to edit.php, and paste it in place and save. Now, if we refresh this page, there we go. Everything's getting filled out. We do have some issues, as you can see here. There's some issues with the actual block text in here. I'm not sure what's going on. Why? Maybe something's not closed properly. Looks all closed properly. There's the div. Where are you closing? It says it closes there. This div closes here with the A tag, section, header. Maybe I just need a Control-Shift-R. Nope. No, something's definitely wrong. It's probably wrong in the form, actually. Something is not closed properly. That's closed. The form is closed. Text area appears to be closed. Labels are closed. That's weird, because if we go to new post, it looks fine. It's just the edit post that seems to be odd. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why that's happening. Okay, so not super important, nothing we need to fix right now. We do need to write the actual update functionality. So left me speechless, baby. There we go. And then we'll click submit. That's going to take us to the update.php page. which we need to add our code to. Right now we have a little bit of nothing in there. So obviously the first thing we always do, require once underscore config.php. And then we can go ahead and start writing out the things we need to do. A lot of this code is going to be identical to the code that we wrote in the insert page, as you would remember from when we created users, when we've done countries, or anything like that. Anything we've done with an edit will be roughly the same logic, no matter where we're doing it, right? So our first step will be to do a session start, because we're going to need the user ID. We'll assign the user just to a throwaway variable. And then we're going to validate our data, normalize our data, and sanitize our data, but all that code is identical to insert.php. So if we just open up the insert, we can literally copy all that same data. This is not the correct thing. Is it? Yeah, it looks like it's it. Yeah, this is all our code. Okay, so I'm just going to copy all of that. Go back to update.php and paste it in place. And there it is for us, right? Next, we can go ahead and write our SQL. So our SQL is our update command, right? So it's going to be update post set and this is where we're going to have title is equal to title, synopsis is equal to synopsis, and content is equal to content. Then we need our where clause, where ID is equal to ID, and we're going to add one extra piece to this, and user ID is equal to the current logged in user. Only the current logged in user can edit their own stuff. If you attempt to edit something else, it's going to throw a MySQL error, and that's what we want. Then we're going to require once our connection script. And again, make sure you be careful how you spell utilities. I don't want like a million Slack messages, and it turns out it's just misspelled utilities. All right, statement equals $con, prepare that SQL. All this is exactly the same as the insert, just the messages are slightly different, right? So the bindings are all the same. Everything is all the same. So the first three bindings are identical, so we'll just include those right now. The last binding we need to bind for this ID in the where clause. Remember what I said, if we forget one, we'll get an error saying that we're trying to bind more values than there is parameters, or we're not binding enough values based on the number of parameters we requested. So this is an int, not an inst. $sign statement, execute. There we go. Our error message is exactly the same, basically. So it's if $sign statement error code, right, does not equal those 5 perfect zeros, then we'll reassign our session form values to the current post value, and we'll redirect with errors to posts edit.php $ID is equal to $_post ID, which is coming from that hidden field we created. There was an error updating this post. Nice and clean. Otherwise, we're ready to redirect with successes. Same link, basically. Edit.php ID equals... No, sorry, not edit, show. Because you want to see the updated changes. ID equals $_post ID. There we go. And then some square brackets. The post was, whoops, let's put that in quotations or we're just writing a bunch of symbols. The post was successfully updated. Please review your blog post. There we go. And I have a funny feeling the error up here, I did a copy and paste. Yep, that's an issue. Let's go copy this link. And we'll come up here to where it says new. We'll wipe that out altogether, put in some double quotations, and then paste that in. So then it will guarantee to go to the correct place. So this should work. If I refresh, hit continue, I have a syntax error on line 45, so let's deal with that. Yep, sure enough, I do. If too many equal signs, way too many equal signs. Let's try refresh, continue. There we go. The post was successfully updated. Please review your blog post. So there we go. Left me speechless, baby. You can see the babies in there. Notice that it converted it from the capitals B-A-B-Y into the now normalized text. Dark and Stormy Night with our lorem ipsum. So we can manage posts. We just can't delete a post yet. Let's click OK. The cool thing is delete is actually super fast, not very difficult at all. Let's deal with the delete.php. So once again, we're going to require once /_config.php. Oh, wait, actually I have one more thing. In the manage.php, one of the things we want to do for sure that I didn't take this out and I should have, is we want to make sure that we're only selecting the posts within the managed posts that belong to the user, right? And we do this by filtering our post by the parent ID, which is the user. And that will that will guarantee that we're only getting posts that the user owns. Now, right now I'm doing this session user ID. We don't need to do it that way. We could do user equals $_session user, right? And we could also make sure that the session has started. But I have a funny feeling it has because we have our authorizer redirect working. So now we just need to replace this with user, which makes it a little clearer to look at. But yes, so it's selecting only posts where the user is equal to the currently logged in user, right? And that's what we want because we don't want people to be able to manage posts that they don't own. So now we're ready to do a delete. We hit the delete page. We want to only allow authorized people to delete their stuff. We'll reassign the user. We'll write our SQL. Delete from posts where ID is equal to the past ID, which is coming from this parameter. And the user ID is equal to the logged in user. So a user cannot delete a post that they don't own. That's basically what it boils down to. We'll include once _utilities /_connect.php. $con is going to be equal to the connection. $statement will be equal to that connection, or that SQL being prepared. Then we're ready to bind the parameter. So we only need to bind the ID parameter, right? And it comes from get because it's in our query parameters, not our post parameters. We didn't post to this page. There we go, and it's an integer. And we're ready to execute. Then we can run our checking, right? So check for errors. If $stmt error code does not equal the 5 zeros, then we'll take our form values and assign them from post and redirect with errors. And we'll just send them right back to post because they shouldn't. That's the only place they can do the deletion. There's no point in sending them back to delete because it would just keep. It would cause an infinite loop, obviously. And then we're ready to redirect with successes, if everything's okay. And again, we're just going to send them back to post where they should be able to see that they removed that post. The post was deleted successfully. Control R. There was an error deleting the post. I'm guessing there's an error with our code. So what we can do to make sure to see if there is, we can add a var dump. And we can do $con, or sorry, $statement, error info, which will give us info about what's wrong, and then we have to make sure we exit so we don't accidentally redirect. So let's go back to manage posts. Actually, we're going to manage posts. Why are we going to posts? Should go to manage.php. I don't know why I was just going to the post. That doesn't make any sense. There we go. All right, hit delete. Okay. You have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds to the MySQL Write version. Your ID1 and user ID equal to blank. So we don't have the user ID because I called it user ID. Whoops. Numpty mistake. Oh, missed that closing curly brace. There we go. Now we can get rid of these two because I'm sure that's fine now. Click refresh. No, still an error deleting the post. Let's double check. Yep, still doesn't like it. All right, let's put those things back in and see what's wrong. Where ID is equal to 1 and user ID is equal to 1. Oh, didn't spell where right. You see, I criticize others for spelling utilities wrong, and I can't even spell where right properly. Refresh. Oh, everything looks golden. However, if I hit refresh now, it's just going to error out because the thing's not going to be there. Actually, it shouldn't error. It just should take us back to here. So the post was deleted successfully. We have no post now. Everything is done. All right, so that's basically everything for parent-child relationships with this stuff. I'm going to add one other piece that's going to show you how to add some filtering into our post table, but I'll add that on a little bit later on and publish that up, and then you guys can add that in as well as pagination. All right, so I hope everybody's staying safe, staying well, and yeah, I'll talk to you soon. I'm going to post the project this week. So stay tuned for that. I'll put an announcement for it and what that's going to be. It's going to be very downscaled from what the last project was, so it should be fairly simple. I mean, maybe an hour longer than a lab. And then I'll send out an announcement as well talking about what we're going to do for the final and how we're going to manage that. All right, talk to you later. Bye.